Psychedelic mushrooms for depression. Psychedelic drugs like psilocybin are back in human trials to treat people with mental health conditions. It's a second revolution for a class of drugs shunned by 1960s society. The day after taking shrooms is really great. So peaceful and everything looks bright and perfect. Not to be that stoner, but I did mushrooms a few times last year and my whole outlook on life has changed. It was like something clicks after each trip. It's hard to explain, but I fully support this. Mushrooms are something else. Edit to add, I'm in my mid-20s and have done my fair share of drugs. I only do mushrooms if I'm in a good headspace, a safe environment, and with someone I trust. I highly recommend to not mess with hallucinogens if you haven't done your own research. How does one who lives nowhere near a study like this get help with microdosing? I've been reading about this for years, and nothing seems to ever come of it. When I ask my doctor, they treat me as if I am a criminal. I don't know a guy, or even know a guy who knows a guy. As 60s hippie. Definitely not shunned by society. My generation embraced psychedelics for the most part, as did some of my parents' generation. I know it's not scientific, but as a teen on the edge of town was a dairy farm and it was a sad morning ritual to go shrooming. In all the years of everyone doing them, I never remember anyone who didn't have a good time or ever see someone have a bad trip. I do remember sitting outside a closed mini-mart for like 6 HRS staring at the neon beer signs in the middle of the night a few times, lol. And unlike chemical equivalents, no one was messed up the next day or had lingering effects. I can 100% see how in smaller doses they could be very effective in treating many conditions. Not to be that guy, but I have a good friend who has a family history of schizophrenia who took mushrooms when we were in our early 20s and started hearing voices that never went away. He's doing okay, but he is on prescription drugs to control it now. I still use them, and as someone who has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder myself, I find them to be very therapeutic. But they are a serious drug and not to be taken lightly. I really hope we can get more research done around them to bring the best out of what's good and limit the potential harm they can do to some people. I don't mean to sound cliché, but taking LSD was definitely one of the most important things I've ever done. It completely broadened my outlook on life, and my quality of life did a complete 180. I am currently using microdoses of psilocybin to fight my depression. The theory is that it disrupts your DMN, default mode network, of your brain. The DMN is the inner voice you have that reflects and ruminates on the past, the future, etc. So those nights when you're awake because your brain decided to review every perceived mistake you've made in your life, that is your DMN. The disruption is most effective in heroic doses, at least what's been studied. And it's most effective for addiction, obsessive compulsive thoughts/disorders and depression that can't be treated with normal medicines, but there is evidence it is effective in microdoses. Personally, I think it has helped tremendously. My DMN, or little voice inside, was stuck in a very negative, obsessive rut that wasn't being addressed by antidepressants or therapy. After about a month of microdosing, less than 5 grams every 3 days or so, I felt much better. My inner voice was/is curious, kind, and eager to enjoy new things, what we can during the lockdown anyway. Now it's to the point I maybe only take it once every 2 weeks or once a month, and still feel good and positive. For anyone on the fence about it, I highly recommend it, especially if you feel like traditional methods aren't working for you. The most difficult part for me was just finding them. I 100% believe microdosing made my life better. Experienced tripper here. There's a ton of great anecdotal cases of aiding mental illness, and we're hopefully on the verge of seeing these anecdotal cases having established credibility in the scientific community via extensive study and trials. We all hope for the best, and by and large I believe that psychedelics are helpful. This is coming from a guy who traveled to Peru for an ayahuasca ceremony with a shaman working on his dissertation in psychedelic psychotherapy. But let's be careful not to delude ourselves into diminishing the potential harm some people can experience using these substances. I've had countless good trips that have alleviated symptoms of depression and changed my outlook on life for the better, but I have also had terrible trips. Absolutely awful trips where all I wished was for it to end so I could be sober again. They have been frightening, painful, emotionally exhausting, and in at least 2 cases dangerous. Case 1, a strong but not overtly strong dose of LSD catalyzed a manic episode, which I had never had before. This ultimately led me to be hospitalized for a week. I was diagnosed after the fact with bipolar disorder, but I have no genetic predisposition, and for a while there they weren't sure if I was coming back to reality. I don't know if this would have surfaced within my mind had I not taken the drugs, but part of me believes that it certainly exacerbated the issue if not sent it over the edge. Case 2, I have a condition, now, known as TMS, tension myositis syndrome, which I now understand to be physical pain, mostly back pain, resulting from stress and anxiety. Before I understood that, I had a shroom trip, strong but not crazy, where I was sent into an anxiety spiral close to a panic attack which caused my back to seize up so tight that I was forced to go to the hospital because the pain was so intense. I share these stories as a reminder that everyone is different, and these drugs can have unforeseen consequences, even if you have taken them safely many times before. Jamie, pull that up. I used to be really intrigued and interested in psychedelics when I was a teen. I went through that phase where I read up on it and really wanted to experience it. Eventually I got around to trying it. I had a bad trip, lost all control of my own thoughts, and realized I don't like that shit at all. I remember feeling the sensation of having some deep, intellectual revelation every 30 seconds. Like I was connecting the dots and piecing everything together and eureka. And then before I could even absorb whatever revelation had just dawned on me, I would think of something else. All in all, I can safely say I gained nothing from it other than the knowledge that I don't actually like psychedelics as much as I thought I would. Different for everybody, I suppose. Decided to take some shrooms a couple of days ago for depression. They totally blasted me off into another world for a while, but when it was all done and over with, my depression was still there. Sad. I've said it before here on Reddit, but being a lifelong depression survivor, the only times I felt safe, comfortable in my own body, pain-free, physical and mental, and loved was when I was experimenting with mushrooms. The few times I was able to get my hands on it. Reading articles like this gives me some hope. Every time I see a story about psilocybin making a return, nothing else happens and everyone forgets about it. When I was 16, 1971, a friend had me at 6 mushrooms. My parents were gone for the weekend and I was alone. I chewed on one, waited 5 minutes, no discernible effect. So I finished off half the bag. It was intense, but not in a bad way. No side effects afterwards, although I did get a look into my future self. It did make being alone much more enjoyable. Pro microdosing, don't be a silly and do what I did at 16. I miss mushrooms. Now that I'm older, that shit is basically impossible to get unless it's the darnet. Sad spores are still illegal in California. Can't even grow my own. Mushrooms cured my suicidal depression years ago. Not to shoot down the positivity, but it's not an instant connection guaranteed. Tripped twice on shrooms and never got an epiphany related to anything life-changing or substantial. Felt like a roller coaster of emotions and nothing more. But I'm more emotional than logical, so maybe it affects logical people differently.